Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Dyer and welcome to Colorado Inside Out on this Friday, May 17th. Let's get right to introducing you to this week's panel. Welcome to Patty Calhoun, founder and editor of Westward, Krista Kafer, columnist for the Denver Post, Eric Sonderman, columnist for Colorado Politics and the Denver and Colorado Springs Gazettes, and Ian Thomas DeFoya, community advocate and former candidate for Denver mayor. This week, U.S. News and World Report released the findings of a study that found Colorado to be the third most dangerous state in the country, mostly because of our high property crime rates. On Wednesday, Governor Polis signed off on new laws that he says will go far in making Colorado safer. And before that, on Monday, Mayor Johnston announced plans for a new Office of Neighborhood Safety, which will focus on community-led violence prevention initiatives. Patty.
Well, let's go backwards on this. So U.S. News and World Report has come under fire for some of their lists. They're still better than the list you get from like Lawn Sweeping USA. Everyone sends these lists all the time. U.S. News and World Report used to be a lot more credible on some of this. If you really want to look at this report, it's like maybe third most dangerous in 2022 because that's where the stats are from. And not only that, but Colorado scored so badly because of property crimes. The list really isn't that accurate. It is interesting that Governor Polis decided when he was signing a bunch of bills, he's on his signing rampage this week, but he was signing ones about guns, about driving, driver's ed, for example. Some will make the streets safer, for example. We might not be hit by a new driver, but he did kind of position it as we are going to be one of the 10th safest states. I think the Denver move will also help make Denver safer. The Office of Neighborhood Safety is a good focus on what the community can do, what can be done outside of traditional law enforcement, get more people involved, but probably be more accessible to the people in the city. So good news, I think, for safety on both ends, as long as you don't read U.S. News.
I want to commend the Denver Gazette. Obviously, I write for the Denver Post, but I read widely. Their editorial said, hey, let's look at these bills that he's touting, and the vast majority of them are pretty minor. They're not going to do what is necessary. Simply tweaking the the driver ed program, for example, is not going to make us in the top 10 most safe states. The way you do that is hiring more officers. I also believe a return to more of the broken windows policing, where you get rid of the sense of disorder, the vandalism, the graffiti, the trash, the vagrant camps, the unruling tent city that is on Auraria, because what that communicates to people is that disorder is okay. I think returning to some of those more traditional police forms where we have beat officers out there who are visible, the community things, the STAR program, the AID program, where we can send folks out when somebody's having a mental issue and we don't need to get the police involved. I think that's an important component. But where we have criminals who are of sound mind, they belong in one place, and that's jail.
We clamp down with legislation on car thefts, and that situation is certainly not rectified, but it's improved. On the other side of the coin, the progressives in the legislature have dabbled with various decriminalizations, bail reforms, whatever, and that has not had a positive impact on the crime rate around here. So legislation does matter. Krista is right that the 5 bills, I believe it was, that Governor Polis signed yesterday, struck me very much as small ball. I don't think anything was very substantial or big picture to those. The other thing, Kyle, was not a part of your question, but is the race that's going on at the moment for Denver District Attorney. And that probably merits some discussion on some future show here, but 2 incredibly able people, John Walsh and Leora Joseph, either one of which would be a fine district attorney. It's sad that one of them has to lose. There are some differences emerging between the two, mainly this week, in that John Walsh has endorsed the notion of safe injection sites, which Leora Joseph opposes. So I think that one is, over the next 6 weeks between now and the election, that one's going to play out.
Mm-hmm. Ian, I love your thoughts on this and this new program for the city of Denver, too.
Well, yeah, I don't take any grain of salt for a report saying we're the best or we're the worst. It's up to the community to decide. And what I know is that while running for mayor and working within the community, the Reimagining Police and Safety Task Force put forward this idea of an Office of Neighborhood Safety. And I think it's really important for us to be thinking about how do we shift away from the need for property crime. I mean, I think with inflation and so many issues, people are struggling. And property crime is often associated with people struggling. I'm not to say that people shouldn't be held accountable when they do steal, because I've had my car stolen, a bike stolen, a motorcycle stolen, and a bicycle seat stolen. And when you can't get to work, that impacts your ability to live a day-to-day. As far as the Office of Neighborhood Safety, I think there seems to be a disconnect that's going on between leaders in the community and the administration itself. There's been criticism about how community oversight will take place, where it lives. I know that people are really looking forward to an independence, much like the independent monitor or the auditor's office, where there's a disconnect from the actual leadership that allows them to hold them more accountable and make their own decisions. But it is no small feat to move 67 FTEs into this new space. I'm really looking forward to see where it goes. This is only one of 100 recommendations that were put forward by the community, so I think it's a great first step because it's number one. I think there were a lot of us that promised we would do this on the first day. I'm glad it's finally happening.
Okay. All right. Aside from signing bills into law this week, Governor Polis received some national attention when he blasted President Biden, a not too often occurrence, over the administration's announcement of tariffs on goods that are made in China. Governor Polis says that these tariffs will really be a major blow to clean energy, which is one of his top priorities. Krista, let's start with you.
Well, we know that Governor Polis took economics classes at Princeton, so I'm glad he's remembering those. If you impose tariffs, those end up going down to people like you and I when we go to buy products. It's not that it actually hurts other countries. I commend the governor for calling that out, but I also think we have to look towards home about what we've done here with regard to energy policy. And I wish the governor had been more proactive in pushing back and getting a waiver from the EPA. We're going to see much higher gasoline prices. We're also going to see higher prices because of what the state has done, a $138 million fee on producers. Again, producers don't just have like a money tree in the back of their, their business. They pass those costs on to us when we go and buy a tank of gas. Also look at what the majority in the legislature did. When the minority says, hey, we really need to put nuclear on the table. It is really the best carbon-free way to make a lot of energy. While I appreciate that he has called out Biden on bad economics policy, I think there's plenty of blame here at home. He needs to look to his own party and call them out as well.
Okay, Eric.
In this inflationary time of, the property tax increases that so many Coloradans got hit with, and now we're going to layer on top of that a 50 or 60% increase throughout the Front Range, not as far south as Colorado Springs, but from Castle Rock north, basically. I note that EPA, when they first suggested this, estimated that it was going to have an impact of 3 cents a gallon. Well, 3 cents to 50 or 60 cents, the EPA only missed it by a factor of 20 or something like that. Polis has been a little bit on all sides of this issue. Right now, he's very forceful in trying to get EPA to back off. But back in 2019, where previous Governor John Hickenlooper had asked for an extension of these mandates around ozone attainment, as the new then Governor Jared Polis pulled back on that extension request. And so that led to a series of events that got us to where we are today.
Mm-hmm. June 1st is when we should expect those gas prices to go up. Ian?
The thing that I want to make clear is the Clean Air Act, had amendments in 1990. 2 years later, the Environmental Justice first executive order by Bill Clinton was signed. And since then, we've learned a lot about reformulated gas, and vehicles have gotten a lot better. The real crux of it, reformulated gas, is just more ethanol. So putting more ethanol and biofuels into it, which increases the cost. It also requires a lot more either truck traffic or pipeline infrastructure construction. And there's one in particular that's out in Aurora called the Magellan Terminal, which has a school on the fence line of this terminal. And because Suncor needs somewhere to store their gas, they're asking for an increase in their permit, which would result in more air pollution directly impacting a school. And then this is an issue that goes back many, many years. In regards to the tariffs, I do think it'll make it more challenging for people to buy them, put them on their house. But if you are accessing any sort of IRA or Build Back Better money that came from Biden, they already had Buy American requirements, and so I don't think that'll matter as much. And I do just want to say the Sunrise Movement, who has been fighting for years around trying to create these sort of resources, they've been calling to use the Emergency Powers Act to actually force for more creation of solar panels in our own nation and try to ramp up our building of clean energy. And so we need all of those in combination with each other.
Do you think there will be a big halt or slowdown of the access to solar panels and EVs because of these tariffs? Will it be an immediate?
Do I think there'll be a halt? Not sure about that. But I do think we are seeing more and more incentives that can be stacked, both state and federal, that will allow people to access that. And so hindering the ability for us to move to clean energy, which cleans up our air and has to do with these ozone problems, they're all interrelated to each other. But again, the Buy American component, I think, rest assured, I think, won't endanger those billions of dollars that can be pulled down by school districts, cities, et cetera.
Okay, Patty?
Well, I have to agree. We'll see more Buy America maneuvering to make this work. Also, speaking of maneuvering, just yesterday, Governor Polis was congratulating President Biden because he has said he wants to reschedule marijuana. So there are a lot of flips very, very quickly in politics. Also, speaking of the flips, we had the incredible move, and Ian can talk more to this, in the legislature, those compromises made when we had all the ballot brinksmanship at the very, very end of the legislative session, when you actually had some people come to the table, make agreements, have proposed ballot measures pulled off so that Colorado could continue really working on solutions to air pollution, to oil and gas problems. And you see people kind of pulling together. It was certainly more than we'd seen in 10 years, really, from Jared Polis on this issue. So we will continue seeing that going. I don't see Colorado ever really going nuclear again in the next generation.
I have concerns about tying more funds to oil and gas, what it does for small producers and the jobs that impacts all across the state of Colorado. And we know the science is calling for us to shift. And so are we setting ourselves up for austerity in the future? I'm worried about that.
Okay. We are now approaching a month as to when pro-Palestinian protesters started gathering at the Auraria campus in Denver. And the campus has reported close to $300,000 worth of damage because of the protesters. Eric, there was a briefing on Thursday where they talked about the amount of arrests and then the actual amount of people who were arrested who were students on that campus.
I'm a big supporter of the right of free speech, of the First Amendment. I support that even when I disagree with the nature of that speech. That's when your commitment to free speech really comes to light. It's easy to support free speech that you agree with. The challenge is to support speech that you disagree with. But there is a distinction between speech and other forms of conduct. And free speech does not give you the right to do $300,000 worth of property damage. It does not give you the right to a perpetual encampment, and on and on and on. And I know Auraria officials have been trying their best to get a grip on this situation. I do not envy where they sit and what they're dealing with, but at some point the laws of our state and the standards of that school, those advocating, whether it's Palestinian rights or whatever, are well within their rights to be advocating that, but they do not have the right to deprive other students of the education. They do not have that disruptive right. And there needs to be a balance, and laws need to be enforced.
Ian?
I think that we've failed just across the globe in finding ways for peaceful protests. I myself have been jailed for singing in a protest at the State of the State, okay? So and yet people can enter the US Capitol and people don't seem to be held to the same account. So there's an inequity in which that is all handled. What I hope does not happen here is that this results in a less free opportunity to use the campus. And from the $300,000, I haven't seen the full breakdown, but turf can be regrown. Lost revenue for events that took place on campus. That's not even the mission of the students in the first place, all right? It's an educational institution, but it's being rented for races and other sorts of things. So I think it comes up somewhere down the middle. I think what they're asking for, what they're concerned about, is the loss of life. It is terrible what's happening across the globe. It's also terrible what happened to trigger the whole thing. I've worked in music festivals. The idea that some people would be celebrating in a music festival and lose their lives, it's all horrific. It is all horrific. And I just hope that the students and the university itself can come to some agreement. It sounds like they've already come to some agreement about disclosing where the resources and where the financing is going. At the end of the day, what I don't want to see is anyone be harmed, right? We don't want to see anyone lose their life. We don't want to see it escalate to that point, for sure.
And they're saying a lot of these events have been canceled because the campus is worried about the safety, Patty.
You don't want violence to beget violence. And while some of the campus rentals are for food things or derby parties, others are for educational activities, and those are getting canceled because they don't feel the the participants can go, say, to the student union and have this event there. So that's significant. You know, the ban on camping on the Auraria campus actually dates back to 2003 with the war in Iraq, and there were protests then, and they worked things out peacefully. Let's hope they're able to do it again peacefully now. But it's really tricky, and it's no coincidence, I don't think, that we are having the rallies for the Nuggets and the Avs. Remember, the Nuggets parties were on the Tivoli campus because it's so close to Ball Arena. Now instead you have, for home games, you've got marches for the Avs from Larimer Square to Ball Arena. For the Nuggets, you've got them from Union Station to Ball Arena. Nice for people who haven't been downtown for a while to see that downtown looks pretty good, but it's no accident that they are not on the Tivoli campus, Tivoli Quad.
Krista?
I think it's time to clean up, take away the encampments. I'm sympathetic to why they're protesting. My heart grieves for those in Gaza. I'm also sympathetic to Israel. They have a right to protect their borders, to protect their people, to go after those who murdered their citizens. It's a complicated issue. What I would love to see these protesters doing is humanizing the faceless, in a sense of a lot of people don't know about Palestinians. They don't know about the suffering in West Bank. But when things are broken, when there's graffiti, when there's anti-Semitism, when people don't feel safe, when there's damages to public property, all of that sympathy that's earned evaporates. And I think it's time to end this. That isn't to say that the university or other public places can't offer the opportunity for peaceful protest, peaceful rallying where you're not breaking things. And I hope that those who genuinely are concerned about Palestinians and Israelis and who yearn for peace and stability in the region, that they will have a chance to communicate that in a way that is safe and effective. But what they're doing right now is not safe, and it's not effective, and it's time to shut it down.
Okay, all right. We talked about how during the legislative session, lawmakers voted to fully fund K-12 schools. But this week, the state's largest school system, Denver Public Schools, said the expected increase in state funding won't be enough for DPS to give teachers the cost of living raises that they were expecting. Ian.
Yeah, and we had a conversation about this last time I was on, that I started my career as an educator, and part of why I shifted away was for the idea that I didn't think we'd be able to buy a house. We have to look to the state, and I look at Tabor and the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and you say, is this inhibiting our ability to raise the resources we need to educate our future? I would say yes. And so I would ask that the community begin to seriously look at that, because no matter what issue you're at, we could look for tax credits all day, which happens at the end of the session, but we need to be able to find a way to pass more resources on. This is even more true in rural Colorado, where the cost of living is equally as out of hand and the housing crisis equally as large. And so I think we have to find a way to put more resources to this, because teachers are undervalued in our society. They are super important civic leaders, and we have to find a way to get them what they need and be able to get them the stability to stay and enrich in lives, because I know so many teachers that are exiting the field because it's just so challenging at this moment.
Okay, Patty.
And this is where we didn't get a compromise at the legislature. We still have ballot measures that could affect the full funding of education, which was approved this year. The DPS numbers are really tragic, because you look at these people who were thinking they were going to get a significant cost of living raise. Maybe they're looking at 2% now. They point to the superintendent, who's gotten a 10% raise. You look at the layoffs of 900 teachers in DPS, and you look at the number of administrators who haven't been laid off. So there are real inequities right now in the DPS, and we're not going to know until the fall, and we see how the enrollment goes. And then you see what happens at the ballot box with property taxes, how Colorado is going to be able to really move forward on funding.
Krista?
I think we're looking, though, at a larger picture. Because of the lower birth rate, we are going to see fewer kids. We're going to see schools that are half filled, and there's going to be some really tough decisions going forward. I'm a substitute teacher. In addition to being an adjunct professor, I also, occasionally like to teach fifth grade art. But so I'm in a lot of schools, and I see some really beautiful things. I also see wasted opportunities. funding is a component, but I also think parental choice is important. I also think going in and clipping dead weight is important. I think consolidating schools can be important. There's a lot more than funding, and our funding is about midway when you look at the country. I look at all the states in the country, but I think there is some bigger trends that we need to address, and I also think just the issue of being more effective. Whether it's letting go ineffective teachers or making sure that classes have a full number of students. Also expectations of parents and making sure that they come alongside teachers and kids behave. It's a complex situation.
Mm-hmm. Eric?
Denver Public Schools faces some very tough challenges. As others have pointed out, it is top-heavy. It is administratively top-heavy. There is no doubt about that. They need to cut some people at top and middle levels. Secondly, they need to close some schools. Krista pointed it out. The population of DPS, even with the migrant influx, is 7,000 to 10,000 kids less than it was at its peak not that long ago. Closing schools is tough. No one suggests it's easy. But you have to right-size the school district if you're going to be financially and fiscally responsible. And for some perspective, and Chalkbeat has done some really good reporting on this, it is not that Denver teachers have not received some very significant raises. The average Denver teacher is making 47% more than they did in 2018. That's 6 years ago. In the last year, the 23-24 school year, counting all compensation, Denver teachers received a 15.5% raise over the course of that year. And in terms of what's on the table now, the district has proposed a 5.2% raise plus a $1,000 one-time stipend for every teacher, and the union wants 8.3%. So yes, there's a difference, but it is not a massive difference. Denver teachers are significantly better paid than they were some time ago. That is not to say that the high-quality teachers in Denver should not be receiving significantly more.
Okay. Now it is the time in our show we go down the line and talk about some of the highs and the lows that we have witnessed this week. We will start with disappointments, low points. Patty.
Since we haven't talked about the Colorado Republican Party yet today, I feel like I must. What a shock that Dave Williams' party has now endorsed Dave Williams.
You stole mine. Yeah.
Sure.
So the absolute worst possible picks in the 4th, the 3rd, the 8th, and the 5th of total wingnuts who, because there's some very good candidates that are running for the Republican Party that should win, that deserve to win. I would go so far to say that if the wingnuts win, even though it would give me a lot of great material for my column, that voters in those districts would do better to have Democrats for 2 years and have serious people return from the Republican Party in 2026.
We have a little over a month before the primary.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting.
Wow, I've been gone for a couple weeks, and I tell you one thing I didn't miss: discussion about Dave Williams. That was a nice, a nice escape. University of Colorado, there's certainly a backstory here, and it should come out at some point. But the way they have treated Patty Limerick, a renowned scholar there, the founder of the Center for the American West, there was a separation with Patty. And I guess universities have the right to do that, but A, there should be a whole lot more transparency, and B, you need to give this woman the access to her life's work, but they're withholding papers and files and the ability for her to basically access the career that she built for herself and the knowledge she produced.
Ian.
Mine is Suncor. Suncor not only has challenged their water permit where they got caught literally with the hose dumping toxics into the water, but the second to last night of the legislature, I picked up the phone and they were trying to convince the Republicans to filibuster all of the bills to block 1338, which was the recommendations of the Environmental Justice Act, and also includes a new refinery regulation that perhaps could rein in their flaring over the years. It was a shocker. The people came together. Even industry partners said, "What are you doing?" But Suncor using their lobby power at the end of the legislature was really a downer for me.
Okay. Let's talk about something positive that's out there.
We've talked about the difficulties of free speech, and a champion of free speech is being honored at Tattered Cover on Saturday. There's a new book of essays out in honor of Joyce Mescus, longtime manager, owner of the Tattered Cover. So go, 3 o'clock.
What day? Saturday?
Saturday.
Saturday, okay.
There were a number of people serving in the House and the Senate from the Republican Party that did good work this last session. They actually got some victories. They opposed some bad stuff. I think they are the component, the opposite of the crazy state party. These are serious men and women making a difference.
A shout out to Urban Peak, which is a service agency locally, the foremost service agency providing housing and services, particularly for homeless youth and those who've aged out of foster systems and others. They are opening a few months from now what they call the Mothership, which is a huge new facility that is desperately needed in this community. They got caught up in a bureaucratic city hall mess in terms of paying the prevailing wage and which prevailing wage should pay. I won't even get into the whole sidebar argument of whether we should have prevailing wages or just let the marketplace take care of this. But the net effect of all of this is that Urban Peak has to come up with an extra $2 million to complete this project because of a city ruling that they were paying the inappropriate prevailing wage. There was a better solution to this thing.
I want to shout out the group that worked on the DPS bond. I was on the committee. We're finalizing our recommendations. They'll come out on the 28th. We all voted last night. Also, on Saturday are 4 of my relatives' birthdays, so happy birthday to my mother, my uncle Mike, my cousins Jeff and Kelly. Unbelievable, all on the same day.
That is great. You're going to have a good weekend. That is for sure. My positive is proof before all of us here in Colorado that you're never really stuck and that there's always the opportunity for a comeback. We have seen that with the Nuggets and the Avs this week, winning crucial playoff games, and even the Rockies, who got on a winning streak, including a 3-game series sweep of the reigning World Series champs. Who knows how the rest of our team seasons will play out, but it's awfully nice to be able to witness resiliency, grit, and determination. Thank you, panel, for joining us this week. We appreciate it. Happy birthday to everyone in your family. Thank you for watching at home or listening to our podcast. I'm Kyle Dyer. I will see you next week here on PBS 12.
PBS 12 believes in the power of original, local programming. Help us bring more shows, like the one you just watched, by donating at pbs12.org/program support today.